on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use scions that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with scions prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days before. So we have an impact in reducing the time of grafting. used these skills on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use science that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with science, prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days before. So we have an impact in reducing the time of grafting. skills on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use science that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with science, prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days before. So we have an impact in reducing the time of grafting. skills on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use science that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with science, prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days before. So we have an impact in reducing the time of grafting. skills on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use science that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with science, prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days before. So we have an impact in reducing the time of grafting. skills on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use science that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with science, prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days. skills on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use science that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with science, prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days before. So we have an impact in reducing the time of grafting. skills on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use science that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with science, prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days before. So we have an impact in reducing the time of grafting.
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are. And Jim, I see you over there. I'll come to you very soon. Very good. So I want to say that the session today also is coming to you as usual from English with simultaneous translation into French. And this is the 65th edition. So we will be having Jim Fitzpatrick and other guests who will be joining to shed more light on the topic today, which will be on markets, crops, and supply-demand scenarios, and to see also what is playing out in their zones. But before I move on to Jim, I will also want to say that with great pleasure, the ACA has finally decided to change the venue of the annual Cashew Conference, the 18th edition, from Burkina Faso to Cotonou, Benin. So I'm speaking to you from the from Benin now, and it's going to take place in the newly established five-star hotel, the Sofitel Hotel here in Cotonou. And so from the 17th to 19th of September, all roads lead to Benin, where we'll join our partners and other actors to have the 18th edition of the ACA Annual Cashew Conference and Expo. So let me quickly also acknowledge the various partners and sponsors who have made this possible. And here I'm talking about the European Union, the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, the GIZ MoveCom Cashew, USAID Sustainable Nuts Initiative, and the Cashew Information. Not forgetting the Cashew Club, of which Jim Fitzpatrick is, the owner and leader. So, Jim, at this moment, how are you doing? Can I see your video on? Huh? Hello, Jim. Let's give Jim a minute to set his video up.
Ernest, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Jim, and welcome to the 65th edition of the GME. And I think at this stage, the floor is yours. The Participants are all waiting to hear from you and to shed light on the market updates and also the crop situation as of now. So thank you very much and welcome, and please take over, Jim Fitzpatrick.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. It's good to be with you again. Can you believe that we've done this 65 times? I can hardly believe it, but I hope it's serving a purpose. I hope it's giving you some good food for thought in this very complex and unpredictable business. Today, we're going to talk about the usual things. We're going to talk about the markets. We're going to try and put some perspectives on the market. There's lots of rumors, lots of chit chat, some propaganda, much inaccuracy. And it's quite confusing right now for everyone, I think, including me. The stories coming back and forward are so wide and varied and so different from each other. So I'm going to try and put some perspectives to put the market in context. And then we'll talk to our panelists, and we have a really good panel today of people that we can rely on to give their straightforward, clear opinions on what they're seeing on the ground, and they're all involved on the ground in the cashew business. And of course, we'll finish with some questions and answers. Our panelists, let me briefly introduce them. First of all, we have from Cambodia, Dara An, the founder of the Ample Agro Product Company, a real leader in the Cambodian cashew sector, president of the Cambodian Cashew Federation, and a man that I'm pleased to have known for some years now. We also have from India another real expert, Amit Pai, the managing partner of Amit Agro, Amit Cashews. Again, a man who is thoughtful about this business and understands it very well. And he'll give us an update from the Indian point of view. From Côte d'Ivoire, from SG Agro, we have the business head who has responsibility for operations and sourcing and marketing. Alex Chulin, someone who has really wide experience in cashews, having worked many years in cashews now, including in Vietnam, and of course, today in Côte d'Ivoire. And our final contributor is Kaba Balde from the Lift Cashew Project. Kaba is the Regional Government Liaison Officer, and I've had the pleasure to know Kaba for a couple of years now, and we've worked together closely on some really interesting projects. So I hope all of our panelists have joined. I know Kaba was having some difficulties a little bit earlier, but I think everyone should be with us. And can I ask our support staff to promote our panelists to the panel on the Zoom link? Just have a look at what we've got.
Jim, please go ahead. It's been done.
Excellent, thank you. Just let's have a look at what we have got in terms of coverage in these four panelists. We have the representatives from the three largest producing countries of cashews in the world, from Cambodia, from India, and from the leading producer, Côte d'Ivoire. And we have a representative from the Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau region, which is hot news right now, producing somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 tons. So overall, amongst our panelists, we have about 60% of world production represented. Now that's going to be interesting. So I'll set the scene and then we'll come and talk to our panelists individually and let's get their views on what's happening in each country. Before we do that, let me remind you that on the African Cashew Alliance YouTube channel, you can catch up with not only the 65 editions of the Global Market Encounter with Jim, but you can also catch up with a lot of other interesting videos and content related to the African cashew industry and perspectives on the African cashew sector in the world market. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of analysis. And my job today is to try and put some perspective on the current market situation. Initially, I thought, let's just have a look and see what are the important indicators. And really, there are two types of indicators that I think we need to look at. So first of all, indicators that have reliable numbers for comparison purposes. Origin imports of RCN, origin exports of kernels and destination imports, shipments and prices traded. These are reliable numbers that we can use for comparisons. On the other hand, and this constitutes about 90% of everything that's said about cashews, is the opinion. And at the moment, when we talk about production or arrivals, when we talk about market reports, we're mostly talking about opinion at this time of year. And this year, that's a little bit later than normal because the crops are a little bit later than normal. We also have reports from the different actors, from traders, brokers, processors, governments, regulators, you name it, everyone has something to say. But we need to be careful when we look at those. We need to see who offers the opinion, what's the basis of their opinion, is there a motivation? And only when we look at that can we decide the accuracy. So lately, it's become fashionable to talk about some rather emotive words in terms of cashews. I've seen someone write that it's a catastrophe. I've seen someone write that it's a disaster. Someone write it's a short crop, and various versions of that. It is, of course, none of those things. It's the cashew market as it's been for many years. So let's have a look at some of the market indicators and some of the trends. At the farm gate, and now we're talking about prices, mainly in West Africa, prices are steady, but they're not taking off. They're not following the cost and freight market. Arrivals are slow, especially for second crops in West Africa. And the question now, is it late or is it short? It reminds me of 2022, where the crop was late, but in the end, wasn't a particularly short crop. We also need to be careful what we compare it to. Last year was a bumper crop. Comparing this year's crop to a bumper crop may well distort the overall picture that we get. Looking at the international RCN market, well, we know that prices have been marked up, that trading is relatively thin, and that buyers remain relatively cautious because although kernels prices have moved up, they're not going to support some of the very high prices being offered for RCN right now. So we need, in that case, to distinguish between what's an offer, what's a trade, what works and what doesn't. If we look at kernels, there's no doubt demand is good. Prices have moved up. In Vietnam, the main supplier, of course, the gap between the lowest price and the highest price has narrowed somewhat. Although I must say this morning there are a few signs that that might be broadening out again. But that's a signal sometimes that prices are going to remain firm. I think one of our panelists, you have your microphone unmuted. If you wouldn't mind, just have a check and see if it's you. Carrying on, have a look at the downstream kernels market. And when we look at the downstream kernels market, what we see is very strong exports from Vietnam. Sellers quite reluctant. So the tone of the market has very much changed in the last month. But buyers are relatively calm. We're definitely not seeing any hint or sign of any panic amongst buyers. And they are taking the moves in price, which aren't unexpected, to look at it and see where the situation will bring them. So let's have a look at some of those numbers. So these are numbers we can rely on. These are numbers we know to be pretty accurate, if not fact. First of all, Vietnam's imports. So Vietnam's imports are strong this year. January to the 15th of April is the highest for that period in history. And you can see on the chart, it's a big step up even from last year. And remember last year, Vietnam's imports of RCN were off the chart compared to other years. So again, we've got a step up. That's just under 20% right now to the 15th of April. And that means that supply in Vietnam has been improving. Of course, most of this material is from Cambodia. Some of it is from East Africa, perhaps a little from Indonesia. But so far, we haven't really seen the first full arrivals from West Africa. So this is setting the foundation for the early part of the season, and imports are quite strong. If we look at Vietnam's exports, and we focus on Vietnam because Vietnam is the leading processor and the leading supplier of kernels and the leading importer of raw cashew nuts in 2023. So if we look again at the January to the 15th of April, we don't have full April figures until Friday, but we're looking at very, very strong exports, 33% up on last year, again the highest in history. And this step up is pretty remarkable, you've got to say. I mean, if we go back and we look, the blue bars is 2024, the green is 2022, and the blue line is 2023. So we're looking at a pretty remarkable step up. Now, there are factors at play, and we'll come to those, other than just sheer demand. Let's look and see if we can identify where this is happening. So first of all, by destination, we just have the figures until the end of March. So we've got the grey bars, 2022 exports from Vietnam of cashew kernels. The orange is last year, and the blue is 2024. So we see that East Asia, excluding China, because I've got China on its own down here, pretty strong. The Middle East and North Africa, the top 6 importing countries, again, strong. Europe, definitely in strong recovery mode. We're looking at Europe back toward 2022 figures for the first quarter. Now remember, although 2022 wasn't a great year in either Europe or the United States for imports, the first quarter was very strong. It was later that imports fell away. And if we look across all of these regions, what we're seeing is strong increases in exports from Vietnam. We're seeing it's particularly strong in markets where low prices have impacted demand. So these are markets typically that don't buy too far forward, often markets where the retail system is a mix of modern retail, i.e. supermarkets, and traditional retail, which means marketing outside supermarkets. And when you get that mix, sometimes price changes tend to impact a little bit more quickly. But we're also seeing growth in the West, in Europe. You can see this is the top 9 importers in Europe, and you can see this growth. And also these countries which were impacted by inflation in 2022 and 2023, we're now seeing a strong return to growth. Particularly notable in the first quarter is North America, mainly the United States, of course. And there again, we're seeing 37% up on last year, but way beyond the first quarter of 2022, which was a very strong quarter. Now, there may be other factors than simple demand at play. Don't forget that the disruption to shipping in the Gulf, the disruption to shipping through the Suez Canal, may well have prompted people to accelerate shipments, may well have prompted people to get their product moving earlier. And that kind of disruption, although it increases cost, let's not forget that some of these contracts are at pretty low prices. So people may have decided to pull their shipments forward when they could. And that may well have inflated the first quarter figures. We won't know that till we see the reaction during the rest of this month, May, and into June. But so far, pretty positive. Let's have a look at prices. So we've looked at RCN trade and imports. We've looked at kernels exports. Now we're going to have a quick look at prices and try and put these price moves in context. So first of all, back on the 10th of April, almost a month ago, we were saying in this very event that the 18-month trend says that W320s are undervalued by 15 to 20 cents a pound. The market at that time was around about $2.40, $2.45. We also said that the long-term trend suggested that 320s were significantly undervalued, maybe by as much as $1 a pound. When we look at that, what we see is different measures showing the same indicators. The 20 cents a pound has pretty much happened. In fact, it's gone beyond that. The breakout, well, we've seen a price increase. Whether it's a breakout from the trend is more difficult, and we'll have a look at that in a minute. So we can conclude from that there is upside potential in kernels. There is continued upside potential in kernels from a demand point of view. But, and it's deliberately a big but, it could damage the growth in demand. In Asia, I mentioned those countries that might be more sensitive to price rises, and it could also be difficult for the recovery of demand in the United States. So the rise in price comes with something of a health warning, because the very rise could affect that which is driving it. That's the way markets work. So let's have another look at kernels prices a little bit closer, and let's ask the question, are these high prices? So I've taken a mid-price range of 265. If someone said to me that was 270, I wouldn't argue with them, but we have to draw a benchmark somewhere for the purpose of the discussion. So when we look at this, if we go a year ago, prices were in or around about the same level, so we're slightly higher than a year ago. We are significantly lower than May 2022, and we are even lower than May 2021. So is 265 a high price, short term, long term? Definitely not. We've got to go back. We're past the lows of the market, but even taking today's price, you've got to go back a long way to find a period when there was a full month where prices were at these levels. So if we take out this last period of low prices, you got to go way back to find those kind of low prices again. So again, the indicators are that there may be some upside in kernels prices. And if we look at the trend, so you've got the 18-month moving average trend in the red dot, and you've got the current price trend. And what we see now is that the price trend has broken the 18-month average, which it hasn't done for some time. If we look back, the last time it broke it, we saw a significant spike in prices, which afterwards came down. So there is indicators there that prices may remain firm or become a little bit firmer on kernels. And just then, to put that in perspective, these are where I'm judging prices at the moment. So I'm saying that the lowest available in Vietnam is around about 260. Might be a little bit on the tiny bit on the low side right now. And then the average high around 275. India's export price 310, you might be lucky to get that today. West Africa, typical export price around 275. 290 has been sold by one or two processors in West Africa, but with provisos of certification, quality, and a lot of other factors. And India's domestic market is around $3.50. All of those prices are for WW320s, FOB, and they are traded prices. That's just to give ourselves some context on where the market is. Let's see what else we can look at in that respect. So I thought, let's look at average prices. So here we have 2024 so far. High, which is today's price, average price for the year, and the low price for the year. It's quite narrow range when you look at it. If you compare that to the 2-year average and the 5-year average, what we see is that the market is 23% below the 5-year high, but just under 4% below the 2-year high. If we look at the monthly average price over the 5 years, the market today is about 8% below that. and it's about just under 3% above the 2-year average. So we've broken the 2-year average, but the market is not yet moving toward the 5-year average. One thing we should note in all of this is that any contract written in the past year is likely to be below today's market. Of course, assuming it's on the same parity. So that's always a big factor in this business. And the amount that the contract is below today's market could have significant impact for the buyers and sellers in those contracts. And if we look at the conclusions, then I think we can say that the price rise should not impact demand in major markets. Because we have a situation, as we've seen, that prices are still, in the longer term perspective, relatively low. But it may be that markets that respond to lower prices, in other words, those markets that grew quickly in the last 3 years, it may have an impact there. So we may see a slowing of growth in Asia, East Asia, China, perhaps in India, probably in the Middle East. And that is, I think, at 265, 270, probably not a huge impact. At 280 to 290, I think it would have a huge impact on demand growth in those areas. And we might see a retracing of some of the demand growth of last year and the year before in those markets. Of course, contract defaults are possible, and I think probably likely in this case. With so many low price contracts out there, and with a certain history of some buyers extending, delaying, even defaulting on contracts when prices were falling, we're bound to see a little bit of tit for tat contract defaults. And that, as that becomes likely, that can build momentum in the market. That can cause kernels prices to move up as buyers move in to replace those contracts that may have been defaulted on. So we need to watch that really carefully. Let's have a look at RCN prices. Well, as you can see, RCN prices 2021 to 2024 up to last Monday when I did this chart. And what we're seeing is a period of quite volatile pricing, really. Now, you don't forget, we've got a general trend where during the season in West Africa, prices tend to fall, and that's related to quality. So in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, prices tend to fall because the quality of the raw nuts, the outturn, tends to fall away. You can see that trend in each of the years. But here we are today, and we've seen markets start quite high, fall, and now we see significant recovery. So we haven't seen prices at this level. Well, it's only a year ago. This is sometimes forgotten. It's only a year ago that we were at these kind of price levels. Now, what's also interesting is that it's a year ago that kernels prices were at these levels, and they weren't particularly attractive, but they're significantly lower than 2022. So in 2022, we had higher kernels prices, higher RCN prices, both fell. And this is when we started to get into this period where the calculation, or sometimes people call it the parity. So what does that mean? At least when I talk, what I mean about parity is, can I buy a shipment of raw cashew nuts today, make kernels out of them, and sell them on with a reasonable profit, a reasonable gross profit? And I don't mean 1 or 2%. I mean a gross profit in the region of 20, 25%, which processors will laugh at, of course, because they probably haven't seen gross margins in that range for many years, at least outside of West Africa. So RCN prices are roughly comparable to where they were a year ago, but much lower than where they were 2 years ago. So when we talk about prices and some of the language used around RCN prices, we need to understand that context, that this dip in prices in the course of the early part of the season was probably not warranted. and that things would look very different in terms of our sentiment about the market, in terms of the way we think about the market, had that not happened. But there is a complicating factor. There always is, isn't there? When we take RCN prices and we project them through to kernels. So I've done it for the three examples that I normally take. So I've taken a 48 pounds, reasonable quality, raw cashew nut, maybe origin, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana. And I've said, what if the price to Vietnam was $1,300 cost and freight, which it probably isn't just now, and to India $1,350, which for 48 pounds, these would be quite high prices. And in Cote d'Ivoire, the same product, if you could buy 48 pounds at the farm gate, around about 350 CFA. And this is what you would get, just on a real basic calculation. So this calculation takes into account the cost of moving the product to the factory, the cost of processing it when it gets there, the value of the byproducts that you might generate, and the sale price. So I think that taking that West African RCN at 1,300 gives you a 271 cost. This is for all kernels, adjusted. So we take the price for all kernels and then we apply a formula to make an estimate for 320. So you'd get 271 in Vietnam, you'd get 307 for India, and you get 204 for Cote d'Ivoire. But that I've taken a slightly lower quality for Cote d'Ivoire. I've used 46 pounds. And if we look at that, it tells us that again, the market, which was briefly in parity when kernels prices started to rise before RCN did, is again not looking like a particularly attractive calculation. If we take the FOB Vietnam, compare it to the average cost, that doesn't work. If we take India, if India were exporting, it would be a very marginal calculation. Only in the case of origin processed in Cote d'Ivoire, which can be profitable, but this is for efficient factories. And let me mention that not all the factories are efficient, and some of them have really high processing costs. But I've taken a processing cost here of $450 per raw cashew nut ton for the purpose of this calculation. One or two are better than that, but that would be a pretty good, competitive, efficient cost, I think, in Cote d'Ivoire. And that works. So right now, what we have is a situation where, mostly for Vietnamese, but also for Indian exporters, that this is a really tight calculation, and they will be reluctant to pay higher prices for raw cashew nuts. If they're focused in India on the domestic market, it works. It's not especially attractive, but it works. It doesn't really work at 1,300. So I think that as kernels stand, this puts a limit on where the raw cashew nut prices can go. Except in the case that we get into a speculative bubble, in which case all bets are off, as always. But look out for this. Look out for this relationship between kernels prices and RCN prices, because in the past, that has been what has caused the most trouble in the cashew business. That's what's caused processors difficulty. It's what's caused, not entirely, but partly, this steep rise in price followed by a collapse, particularly in RCN. So I think there is, for the time being at least, a ceiling on RCN prices. And buyers really need to be cautious on what they buy, particularly if they're focusing on export markets. You might get away with it in the Indian domestic market. So we've been looking at prices, we've been looking at exports and imports, and what we're seeing is a market that's moved up, but that is still not in the kind of balance that you would hope for so that it could move forward. Let's have a look at production. So I'm only going to talk about production in countries where we don't have guests. We'll allow our guests to tell us about their countries, but I'll give you a quick look on some of the reports from other countries. Nigeria, I am getting contradictory reports. I'm still getting people telling me it's a very good crop. I'm still getting people telling me it's 20% down. Now, maybe it's about where you're based. Maybe it's simply about whether you compare this year's crop to the bumper 2023 crop, or you compare it to the average crop over the last few years. The reality is probably somewhere in between. If we look in Ghana, there were some very optimistic forecasts. I think we can be almost certain that those are not going to be met. I was in Ghana 2 weeks ago, working with TCDA, some great things going on there. But I think that the crop is smaller than some of the original forecasts. And some people mentioned around 160,000 tonnes. That wouldn't be a bad crop at all. It may be a little lower than that. But definitely quality has deteriorated as the season has gone on. In Benin, the crop is almost certainly lower than expected. But again, expectations were high. Again, this crop might be significantly lower than last year. The situation, though, is distorted. So we have the ban on the export of raw cashew nuts. It's not clear whether that's temporary or permanent. We're waiting for processors to buy or to finish buying. Whether or not, or how that works is unclear, at least to me. Whether the processors declare we're finished and then exports can happen, or processors will say, well, we're not finished and exports can't happen, at least through the ports, is unclear. So as long as processors are not finished buying, according to my understanding, there cannot be exports through the port of Cotonou. What happens in the meantime is there's a lot of exports into Togo and a lot of exports into Nigeria. And this is making the crop situation in both countries also difficult to read. But for now, it does appear there's a little bit less production. Hopefully there'll be more processing this year, but it's not at all a clear situation due to the regulatory issues and the enforcement issues. Burkina Faso, I think that there is a problem with the crop in Burkina Faso. I think that production is well down on the forecasts. I think that the supply of raw cashew nuts is limited and that the processors there are having some difficulty sourcing enough raw material of the right quality at the moment. In contrast, in Guinea, reports suggest that the progress appears to be good, maybe a little bit behind expectations. Exports are progressing. The one or two processors that are active are processing. Doesn't look, on the face of it at least, as a difficult situation. Overall, in these countries in West Africa, as you can see, quite a mixed series of reports. Nothing, with the exception perhaps of Burkina Faso, nothing overly dramatic, but smaller crops in all areas. Bit like 2022, actually. You know, and when I look at this, I always consider something that was said to me a few years ago, that although cashew trees are drought resistant, yields are not. So let's have a look at some of the production estimates and try and put some context in it. So these are my figures. So we're looking at production in black over the years and then for the various major producing countries and regions. And I always do it like this. I do a low estimate based on the most pessimistic information I'm receiving and a high estimate based on the more optimistic information that I'm receiving. So adding that up, on the low estimate, the crop would be down by about 13%. That's taking everyone's low estimates. And on the high estimate, it will be down by about 3%. Maybe the high estimate is a little bit optimistic. One thing that we have to be really careful of here is that early in the season, a number of governments in West Africa particularly issued crop forecasts, predictions and estimates that were based on an increase to last year's crop. None of them have turned out to be accurate. And if we compare some of those estimates to what's actually happening, it's very easy to come to a conclusion that the crop is significantly down. You know, we hear numbers like 30% down thrown around. Definitely, it's possible that the crops are 30% down on the government estimates. But the government estimates were way, way too high in the first place. Even in normal conditions, they were way, way too high. So we need to put the production estimates that we talk about into a context. And if we look at this, if we look at the low estimate, so the low estimate is still way above the 2020 crop. So 2020 was the last year before Cambodia had this immense increase in production. And if we look at the high estimate, it's actually definitely below 2023, but above the 2022 crop. So what we're suggesting here is that there's not a huge margin in this, that the impact of shorter supply is going to be there, but that it's not going to be as great as some of the more dramatic statements and estimates count. Remember earlier this morning I mentioned that we have to be careful about whose opinion we're listening to, whether they have something to sell or something to influence. And this is really where it comes down to. So we have a look and see what would be the impact of a decline in the crop. So what I do is I take production, the blue bar, consumption, the orange, and then production plus the carry-in from the previous year. And so you can see very clearly 2021, 2022, 2023, significant carry-in each year, and therefore significant surplus. And of course, significant surplus meant lower prices over 2022 and into 2023. Now, the carry-in has largely been dealt with. What we might have called the surplus carry-in has largely been dealt with. And then we took a scenario, what would demand supply look like with a 10% reduction in the crop? And what would demand and supply look like with a 15% reduction in the crop? And that's worldwide. So 10% worldwide reduction, 15% worldwide reduction. And really, when you look at it, if we had a 10% reduction in the crop, you probably would get back to balance on supply and demand. Slightly demand based on, now I'm basing demand on a 3% increase on last year. Now that is optimistic in the sense that we saw prices rise and last year was a really good year anyway. So that would bring us to a balance. If we got a 15% decline in the crop worldwide, assuming that demand continued to grow by just over the 3%, which is the average, we would get a shortage. And that shortage is about 13%. And when you think about that 13%, we have to consider that typically in cashews, a relatively small shortage leads to quite a high increase in price. You only got to go back to 2017 when there actually was no shortage and prices boomed up. So we have to be very, very careful when we look at this. So a balanced position can still lead to price rises. But it could also, as I said earlier, have a big impact on demand in some countries and some regions, causing demand to slip back. And that, of course, would affect the balance. So in some countries, let's just underline, last year was a bumper crop, and it's not valid to make a direct comparison between this year and last year. We need to look back over a much longer period, maybe 5 years, to make a valid comparison. Secondly, the early estimates need to be treated with caution. Estimates of a bumper crop, again, are often made for show, for politics, for all kinds of reasons, but they can easily distort the way we look at the market. So we need to be careful when we look at that and try to make our comparisons with what's actually happened. The context is what's actually happened. The context is not what people expected to happen early in the year. So saying that there was going to be another massive crop in Côte d'Ivoire, bigger than last year's, was very unlikely to happen at any point. It's not going to happen now, so we need to compare it to the average crop over the years. Now, 2021, 2022, 2023, we did see prices of 320s above today's levels, up as high as $2.85. They entered that period around $3. So is it possible that kernels return to those prices? It probably is. So key points from my point of view. In West Africa, the crop is late. There is obviously, as the crop gets later, an increasing risk, but the impact is not known. It does have a lot of echoes of the 2022 season. It could be a long season. Perhaps farmers who haven't done so well so far tend to go and pick more nuts, tend to go and look after them better. The season is not over, so beware of exaggerated claims. People throwing around numbers doesn't make them true. Production may be less than last year, based on the latest forecasts. Farm gate prices, though, haven't really caught fire. Now, I know in Asia, in Cambodia and in India they may have, but not so much in West Africa. Not in big producers in West Africa, prices are steady, but they're not really following the trend of the international cost and freight prices so far. Kernels are at risk of defaults. That's always a source of potential spikes in the market, potential jeopardy in the market. But let's not forget, as we go probably into the second half of the year, that if we do get higher prices, and I mean higher than today's prices, it could impact demand in some regions. So we are looking at, I think, a lower crop. We are looking at higher prices. Prices are higher because they were too low. I think they would have gone up in all circumstances. But we need to be careful that this doesn't kick off an unwarranted speculative bubble, because that could have real danger for recovering demand in North America and growing demand in the Middle East and in East Asia. That's my scene setter. Let's go and talk to some of our guests. So I'm going to start off by talking to Dara Ann, the founder of Ampel Agro Product Company and the chair of the CCF, not president, I'm informed. Dara, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, I'm
Well,
here.
thanks very much for joining us. It's really good to hear from you. How are things with you? All well, I hope?
Everything is good, but very busy during the time of the cashew harvest season.
Well, I mean, we've seen Cambodia has really become a leading producer in the past 5 years, and Cambodia in many ways now is the fulcrum of world production and is crucial to world production. How is the crop this year, in your opinion?
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim, for the question, and would like to thank you again for inviting me to join this the event. My third time already, and would like to say welcome all participants that join this particular meeting, which is very important. So for Cambodia, this year, everybody might know that the El Nino affect a lot to the crop of the Cambodia also, because we don't really have rain so far, and we just have a few rain like last week, but it's a little bit late for especially the variety of M23 already. You might know already that the M23 flowers free time. So we got the harvest during the first flower and the second flower, but we don't really have much for the third flower. But we know that the production is going down, but my personal thinking, I think it's not much. So my guess is about maybe 15% going down. Not really much, because the main thing is because even my plantation, we still have a good harvest if we take a very good care of. And but most of the cashew in Cambodia, the farmer they don't really take care of. That's why we know that the production will going down a little bit. And but one more thing that we would like to tell all of you also that because we are not harvest the same area of the cashew. You might know that every year people try to grow cashew, and we know that during the 2024 there are some plantation are ready to harvest. So because of that, we can estimate that the production is not going down more than 20% or something like that. I'm thinking maybe around like let's say the 15% around that. And most of the don't sell the wet nut. They try to dry the wet nut and keep. If we compare last year and this year, so the dry nut is more than last year, more than last year, because people try to dry the cashew nut and keep it. But for the recent month, because of no rain, and the price of the cashew is good, the farm get. We cannot imagine that the price of the unfantasy the farm get is 1.37 farm get per kg, US dollar per kg. So it is very good price for now. And that's why a farmer, they are very happy to sell the wet nut during this time. But we know that most of the farmer they keep the dry nut to sell during the September and October. So we that is the crop of Cambodia for this year.
What about in the longer term? Do you still expect an increase in production in the coming years?
Yes, of course. Like apart from the climate change, we are sure that the production will be going up. It's not only the way that people maintain the existing plantation, but according to the price, and according to the government policy, and according to the availability of the land in Cambodia. So Cambodian people will try to improve in terms of the area of the production. So we hope that in the next few years, if the climate is not affect very much, but it is not affect very much, and we hope that the production will be keep, but the production of Cambodia cashew will keep increasing.
So does that mean? I mean, when I was with you in February at it was a really good conference, the World Cashew Conference in Siem Reap. I was impressed with the new policies and some of the ambition. Do you see development of processing of cashews in Cambodia now, and do you think that will continue?
That is very, very good question. Like before the I can say that before 2022, there is about like less than let's say less than 15 processor in Cambodia. But now we got more than 40 processor in Cambodia now. They are trying to set up the cashew nut processing factory in order to process the cashew for the market. The thing is, because we have a good policy that the government try to encourage a lot. That's one thing. And another thing, in terms of the local investor, we have received a lot of buyer from abroad, that they are coming and asking not only the kernel, they also asking for the oil extraction from the cashew shell also. So that's why like now we have more than 40 processor, and I can say that like 10% of the processor, they are reaching the good quality. I mean the good quality in terms of the a basic international food safety standard that they can export to the giant country like US, Europe, China, which is they really require at least international GMP and ACCP. So which is this is very good that those kind of the factory they focus on the quality, but not only the quality, but they are they vote a lot in order to buy the raw cashew nut to keep it and process for 1 year. So this also that the government try to work a lot with the government bank. They want to provide a low interest rate to the processor in Cambodia in order to expand the productivity in order to meet the demand of the market of the kernel.
Okay, excellent. We're looking forward to hearing more about cashew processing in Cambodia in the coming years. Dara, and will you stay with us? We get the perspective now from India, but please stay with us and we'll come back and there'll be some questions and answers. Thank you very much for that.
Okay,
really interesting. Let's move to India and Mr. Amit Pai, the managing partner of Amit Cashews, Amit Agro. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hi, Jim. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to interact with you always.
It's our pleasure. You're very welcome. So we've been talking about production and guessing or guesstimating Indian production is not easy. I know that. Originally, I'd heard some pretty positive estimates on the crop. I'm going back 8 weeks now. How has the cashew harvest in India progressed so far? What's the general picture?
So if you're talking of the Indian crop, the progress has been fairly slow as expected. We are at the fag end of the first crop cycle in most of the west coast of India. Due to this delay of over a month that we had in the first crop, we're seeing a shrinkage in certain areas. It's almost similar across the country as we see. Also, a new trend that has been spotted this year is that farmers and farm gate traders have started to hold upon some stocks with themselves. So that's adding a bit of a fuel to the shortage stocks that's spreading across in the country. The better part is West Coast, the places that we belong to, is ready to harvest a good second crop. We are seeing, good flowering happening in the second stages in Karnataka and Maharashtra. Almost all the trees have reported good flowering and are carrying good seeds and looks like a possible decent second crop.
Okay, so a disappointing first crop, but optimistic for the second crop. What about quality? Has there been any deterioration in quality over this season so far?
We've lost about a pound or a pound and a half compared to last year, but the fall in quality is not as drastic as what it was in Africa. In the western coast, normally what is 50 to 53, we've seen it in the range of 50 to 51 pounds, with nut counts anywhere from 155 to 170, 180. But overall,
Right.
the quality reports have been good. The color has been good because it was a dry spell. So quality-wise, Indian nuts are still at par.
Okay, well that's good news at least. And was the first crop, was the problem the weather? Do you think it was El Nino, or what brought that situation about?
Undoubtedly, we received below average monsoon last year, and it was the shortest spell of monsoon in India. Plus December, which is normally having 3-4 heavy rains a year, went dry. So plus the heat waves from March affected the first crop. Coastal India received some rains in April, which is acting as a good catalyst for the second crop. We are seeing that effect come into play now. Also, what we are seeing is a reduced crop wind on India, because we are estimating the monsoon to be earlier by 10 to 15 days. a late beginning plus an earlier monsoon will result in a smaller window for the Indian harvest.
Okay, so it's kind of mixed news in that sense. I mean, look, it's a really difficult question, but we started with an estimate, I think, around about 780,000 tons for all India. We've seen crops as low as 650 in recent years. Where would you put this year? And I know that's a ridiculously difficult question.
It's a very difficult number to fix, because what is happening is, in India, since the processing has spread across all the country now, and the harvesting is happening in just still about 40% of the country. So what is happening is the harvests is getting massively redistributed all across the country.
Yeah,
It is thereby limiting the possibility of collecting the accurate data at the moment. Plus, again, not all the crop that is harvested has come into the market. I think we'll need to wait another month or 45 days before you can come out with proper numbers for the Indian crop.
Okay. So a kind of a mixed picture, but room for optimism from the second flowering.
Exactly.
Too early to make a real pitch. I think a shorter season, tighter season, distribution difficulties, and for people that aren't aware of the change in the location of processing in India, where processing has moved, maybe we could say north to consumption areas, has completely changed the picture of the industry there. But I mean, what about processors? We've heard for some time that Indian cashew processors have been having a tough time. Is that improving? Will the higher kernels prices help?
This is a bouncer of a question, Jim. We are a part of that making, I'd say, because Vietnam, if is adding capacity, it has got a huge market to sell to. Whereas in India, any capacity that we are adding is being sold only in our country. So what used to be India's advantage is also proving to be a disadvantage, because we are selling in a limited geography. Indian margins have been under pressure for the past 3-4 years, owing to an oversupply situation where the kernels processed was always ahead of the demand. But we can see that trend reversing this year, primarily because of two reasons. One is because the absence of an active spot market for raw materials at the present time. Not a lot of excess material has been coming into India of late. Of course, that situation is bound to change in the next 2 to 3 months. The other point, the other larger point is loss of capacity in the past 3 months. So if I know it well, in the past 3 to 4 months, India has not processed over 35 or 40% of its installed capacity. So that is one whole quarter we lost for slow processing. And even now, Indian factories are hardly doing 50 to 60%, because a lot of cargo is stuck up at Colombo and other transshipment ports. So we are seeing this drop in production extending for another 15 to 20 days before the cargo starts moving into the Indian ports. So what can I? This is added to almost a zero inventory at the factory level or at the stockist level, which is building a very positive sentiment for the processors. Largely, India has been someone who covers for 3 to 4 months at a go, and the people who have done that seem to be on a better pitch this time. The spot buyers will end up paying prices adjusted to the spot kernel markets, but I think that should also be a better position for the processors to be in. Overall, it looks like a good year for the processors and the farmers.
Good. About time, one might say. What about the consumer? How do you see demand in India at the moment and over the rest of the year?
Demand in India has been good for the past 4 or 5 years. Post the introduction of GST, the new tax regime in India, the demand has really shot up, which is why you can see that India is importing more, processing more, but not exporting more, which is a very evident say indicator that our demand has grown. Again, what we see is we are expecting decent growth in demand this year, again commensurate to last year, because we Indians are, sort of habituated people. If you like buying something and eating it, then 5, 10, 15% variation in the price doesn't dent the demand as much as it does in the West. So I don't see the demand slowing down to a large extent because of any change in prices, unless the price change is so huge. If you're looking at 20, 30%,
Yeah, yeah.
then we can see something.
So, and that's been the pattern in India for many years, hasn't it? Really, it's with some interruptions, COVID, for example, demand has been positive and it's been relatively price inelastic. So that's, and India, of course, sometimes people forget India is the largest consumer of cashews in the world by a long way, and demand in India is a primary determinant of the supply-demand balance. But for most people outside of India, that's seen in terms of the demand for raw cashew nuts. Amit, that's really interesting. Thank you very much for such a straightforward, succinct description of the situation. I think we've all learned something about India. Stay with us if you will. There'll hopefully be some questions later on. I want to move to Côte d'Ivoire and to Chulin, Alex Chulin. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Jim. I'm fine. And you?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Thanks very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know you are a pretty busy guy.
Thank you for your invitation, and it's a pleasure to always participate in your forum conference and also share the opinion with the other panelists. Thank you.
So what has it been like this year? What's been your experience of the 2024 cashew harvest so far in Côte d'Ivoire?
Well, I think you have already a professional analysis in general. The crop is delayed almost 2 weeks. And the first crop quality, quantity are not as expected. Second crop is going on. We cannot announce an official figures, but in general, so far, to compare with last year, our buying quantity at the same time, we are almost a 15% delay to compare of last year. And I think so far governments reacted at least 3 times to ban the export to support the local processors, which is welcome and appreciates to support the local processors. I think it means that the delay is in general, the quantity, the supply is in general. We keep on buying. I think the harvest will be longer. Definitely the quantity will be deducted. For my personal opinion, because we don't have the official figures of export quantity and offload quantity, but I think 10 to 15% is a very reasonable estimated so far. Jim?
Yeah, and what about quality? We've heard a lot talked about quality this year. Have you seen quality better or worse than previous years?
Actually, it's worse. Regarding our buying last year, we have almost the average whole crop is like a 46, almost a 46 average from the beginning to the end.
Right.
Actually, I think at least 0.5 to 1 LBS deducted to compare with last year or as a processor.
Okay, so significantly poorer, and I suppose we can expect that at the very end of the year, that will be lower again. That would be the normal trend.
Definitely. Definitely.
Okay. So in your experience, and you work in a particular part of the country, but you are buying cashews every day. You are definitely looking at, so far, a lower outcome, but a longer season. So we'll have to keep close eye on what goes on. I was listening about farm gate prices, and people were telling me that it's relatively stable. Is that correct? Or are we seeing moves in farm gate prices?
Well, we have to say, how to say it, from the beginning to now, it's not stable. At the beginning, the farmer gate price was respected like 275. At the beginning, for the first crop, I think the buying from the international market was also not so strong. So somehow the price was expected, but the things, I think end of March, beginning of April, that the market feel the crop delayed and deducted, the quantity will be happen to increase the price going up to 300. And then actually, I think from 300 to 325 from the region to the others, I think also actual situation. So we have three phases so far from the beginning. But so far, I think it's cannot be sure that it will be steady like this, because the buying obviously stronger and stronger so far.
So you've got the rising prices and lower quality. So the overall cost from a processor's point of view has moved up quite a bit. I was with you there earlier this year, and I saw some of the product you're producing, and I must say they're some of the best cashew kernels I've seen. How is the processing business in Côte d'Ivoire? I know the volume is going up throughout the country. How is your experience of it? Going well?
Yeah, I think it's getting better and better in terms of recognize of the value of kernel from Ivory Coast on the market side, which is a very positive and encourageable as a processor to do the processing business in Ivory Coast. The certification are also well installed. More and more know-how, technology support, spare parts support, value chain support, I think is moving positively. Of course, we need more improvements to get better results. But so far, I think the processing of cashew in Ivory Coast is going well. It's going well.
I'm glad to hear it. Well, I wish you a very good season. I'm sure any kernels buyers that may be listening to us would be interested to talk to SG Agro. As I say, some of the best quality cashew kernels that I've seen in West Africa.
Thank you.
Stay with us. I hopefully that we'll get some questions for you. I'm sure we will. And I'm going to move on then to the region that's just now beginning to harvest, and to my good friend Kaba Balde, the Regional Government Liaison Officer of Lift Cashew. Kaba, how are you?
I'm fine, Jim. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thanks. How are things in Senegal?
It's okay. Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to this program, ACA program, 65th program. The harvest currently is doing fine. Just to explain to you which stage we have been. First of all, I would say that we are in the early mid-period of our harvest. Basically, looking at some of the activities of the launching of the cashew campaign we had in Senegal, Guinea-Bissau. For Guinea-Bissau, the cashew season was launched around 15th of March. And that of Senegal, we will be launching the cashew season officially on the 15th of May. But business transactions with cashew traders had already initiated 2 weeks ago, around 20th of April. And for Gambia, there is no launching event for cashew campaign, and it had started around the mid of March. So currently, the cashew season is in plain movement.
Okay, and what's the overall picture, Kaba? What are people? I know it's very early stage, but what are people saying? Are they optimistic about the crop outcome, or is there different opinions from the different countries?
Yeah, basically, initially around, let's say March, producers, traders were very much optimistic of a bumper harvest this year, 2024. However, it has changed. What we have noticed due to changes in weather, there have been, how to call it, very, very high temperatures in the regions for these past 3 weeks. This has actually borne flowers, cashew flowers, and also some increase in winds in the region. So this caused a lot of dropping of cashew flowers. And this has led to actually a reduced forecast for production in the region. That is for the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Senegal.
Okay, so this will reduce the quantity across the whole region. I mean, it's a relatively small area, but it produces a lot of cashews. What about quality? Is there any feedback on the initial quality coming in as yet?
Yeah, currently quality seems to be stable. My conversation with producers and the traders, they have how to call it? They have agreed that quality is stable for the region, and basically, especially for the first harvest. We are in our first harvest, and in our second harvest, we may expect a little drop down in quality because this year we will be having early rains. So these are some of the concerns that we have in the region. But basically, for the first harvest, the quality is good. We only register a lower production. And the production estimates for this year are forecasted to be lower by the range of 30 to 35% for the 3 countries.
That's significant. Okay, Kaba, there was one of the things, I mean, you and I worked last year together on this, the cross-border trade in the region. For people who aren't familiar, you have 3 cashew producing countries very closely linked together. And there is significant cross-border trade. Much of it technically illegal, but it still goes on. Is there any change in the trend in cross-border trade? Last year, we saw a lot of material move from Guinea-Bissau into Senegal for export, eventually through Dakar. Has that changed?
Yeah, basically on the market, when you look at the ground, the landscape of the cross-border trade in these 3 countries, the key indicators haven't changed yet. That is, first, there is a huge price differentials between Guinea-Bissau compared to Senegal and the Gambia. In the initial, the cashew season in Guinea-Bissau, the official price was 300 francs CFA per kilogram. But we have seen a surge in prices in Guinea-Bissau. Now, currently, as we talk, prices are hovering around 350 to 400. So which means we have seen an increase in prices in Guinea-Bissau. Compared to Senegal and the Gambia, there is a huge price differentials. Guinea-Bissau is registering currently between 350 to 400, whereas in the Gambia, we are having 625 CFA per kilogram. This is one of the market indicators, and these are one of the drivers of the cross-border trade between the cashew nut flowing from Guinea-Bissau coming to Gambia, to Senegal and the Gambia. However, this may not be the trend this year, because there have been some policy shift in Guinea-Bissau. First, they have repealed their law on the intermediaries. What they did is this time they give traders direct access to buy from producers. So, which means this is expected to reduce the transaction cost for exporters. So basically, given that we have a lot of traders, increased level of traders in the region this year, this is expected to actually convince farmers in Guinea-Bissau to actually trade, to be selling their nuts in Guinea-Bissau instead of coming through the border. This is one of the reasons, one of the policy shift by government, which can have a huge impact on the trade this year, and it can also curb the cross-border trade. The other reason is the fact that the government of Guinea-Bissau this year, they have reinforced their borders with police patrol teams to actually curb the illegal trade. So basically, given the fact that Guinea-Bissau has taken these measures of policy shift in intermediaries, second, also they have worked on reinforcing the borders. So it will be really a big risk for producers to be smuggling raw cashew nut over to the border. However, there are still some small flaws that are coming from Guinea-Bissau to Senegal and to the Gambia when I had discussions with traders.
Wow, that is a complex situation. So it sounds to me as if the government in Guinea-Bissau is employing a kind of a push and pull strategy, reducing costs, allowing exporters to access the farm gate to pull the product toward Guinea-Bissau, and then attempting to control the border in order to push the product toward the port of Bissau. But that might create great competition in Senegal. If there's a lot of traders based in Senegal expecting material to come from Guinea-Bissau, they may well end up struggling for local material.
Exactly. This is what this is going to be very costly for processors, local processors in Senegal and the Gambia. Basically, given the rise in farm gate prices, it will be very difficult for processing companies to procure raw materials from producers. And because of the problem, just like you have mentioned in your presentation, consumers, the international market, there has not been any expectation of a rise in prices. So processing companies will be faced with financial constraints to be able to actually gain a margin in exporting in international markets. So this is going to be a huge headache for processing companies in Senegal and the Gambia and in the region. So this year, although margins, they have always said that margins will be lower. We are very keen, but I believe this year margins will be even thinner for processing companies.
That's very interesting. That was one of the things you and I found in our research last year, that if the border were closed or even partially closed, that processing investment in Senegal would run into trouble. Although production in Senegal is still forecast to rise over the longer term, is that correct?
Exactly, yeah, because when you look at the landscape of the cashew industry, cashew sector in Senegal, there has been an increased investment by government to actually expand production in the cashew sector. Projects like Agropole and some other projects like PACAS have been in place to expand production of cashew in Senegal. So these are some of the measures taken by government to expand production, and in the long run, we expect production to increase in Senegal.
Okay, it's a really fascinating scenario in the region. Kaba, thanks very much indeed. It's really good to have you on and to hear your opinion. And thanks to all our 4 panelists for really interesting contributions. It's it doesn't look like an easy year, does it? But when has there ever been an easy year in cashews? So let's go back to Ernest and let's see if we have some questions for our panelists. Ernest.
Thank you very much, Jim. And Thanks so much also to our guests. Here I'm looking at Andara, Amit, Alex, and then also Kaba. Thanks for your great inputs into the session today. There are a number of questions for you, fortunately one each, and so I'm going to do the rounds, starting with Andara, where the question is about the price markup between wet and dry nuts. Are there really any markups? Are farmers really with the benefit of getting premium prices if they take the time to dry in Cambodia?
Yes, that is a very good question. Normally, whenever the commercial farmer, they have enough resources, especially the money, they don't want to sell the wet cashew nut during the harvest. They normally dry and wait to sell during September and October. The main thing is because they will have the huge buyer from the Moon Festival and Chinese New Year, thing like that. So that's why these 2 months is very important for
but in percentage terms, what is the price difference if they wait till September to sell? Is there any price
during the harvest season? So normally the dry nut around maybe I can calculate for you.
Okay. In the meantime, just to remind you that the ACA Annual Cashew Conference, the 18th edition, is taking place this year in Cotonou, Benin, and in the Sofitel Hotel here in Cotonou. So see you all in September. So yes, you were getting us the figures.
Okay, so normally for the wet nut and the dry nut during the harvest season, there's a 0.25 difference.
0.25.
Yeah. So whenever the farmer, whenever the
25% difference.
No, not about percent.
Or just the price, 0.25.
Yeah, for the price. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, very good, very good.
Yeah. That is a very specific. If not like that, then the farmer they will not sell. So, but normally the farmer they wait until, like I said, September and October because the price will be going high. For example, like if you have the wet nut price about like 1.3 US dollar per kg or something like that, you will be able to sell up to 1.6 to 1.65 during the September or October. Okay. But this is I'm talking about the KOO around 20%. So sorry, 27%.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Now I move to Amit. You were talking about a situation in India in terms of the processing, and the question is whether there is going to be a shift of processing away from small factories to the large ones as we see in Vietnam. Is that a future? Is that what you see?
I wouldn't say a complete shift because India is a very heterogeneous market. When you talk of Vietnamese factories, they're essentially large factories catering to large global customers. But in India, there are factories that are catering to really small customers who would be buying 500 kgs, 600 kgs in a month, or there are people who are buying 300, 400 tons a month. So India having that diversity, it is not very difficult for a processor in India to find a buyer that suits his size. Of course, when you talk of the cost of production, if being large helps, that's a different perspective. But in terms of being able to sell, being able to process, being able to grow in this industry, the scale doesn't make much of a difference in India.
Thank you very much, Amit. Now to Alex. This may be a very tricky one. Is a subsidy by the government going to be enough to compensate for the quality loss and price increases this year? That's a question. Is Alex? Yes. Alex?
You mean the subsidy?
Yes.
Advantage
Whether the
for?
subsidy in place by the government will be enough to compensate for the quality loss and price increases this year. This is a tricky one.
Well, I think the subsidy is necessary for starting in encouraging the processing business or industry in Ivory Coast.
Yeah.
And I think so far is very positive. And we see the result. And not only from the subsidy, and also the other efforts from governments are really appreciated and very helpful for the processing industry in Ivory Coast. Of course, any business has to think without subsidy how we can continue the business, continue the industry. I think as long as I mentioned before, the value chain in Ivory Coast getting better and better situation. I think one day, we can reach the healthy business industry in Ivory Coast for cashew business.
Thank you very much, Alex. Now to Kaba, I know you are very familiar with the region, and you may have also noticed what the questioner has raised here, the state of the plantations in particularly Guinea-Bissau. The question is, what is the future of cashew production in the region, given the aging crop in Guinea-Bissau, and whether there are any programs to address this situation? Hello, Kaba.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello.
Did you get a question?
Yeah, it was like breaking and I didn't hear it.
Okay, so let me take it quickly once again. I'm saying that you're very familiar with the Sagabi region and also the state of the plantations there. And the question is asking, what is the future of cashew production in that region, given the aging crop in Guinea-Bissau, and whether there are any programs already to address this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anes. Cashew production in Guinea-Bissau, just like you mentioned, there is currently some constraints concerning about the aging of the plant, the current plants that are aging, and this is expected to reduce production in the future. But there are some programs that are in place that are coming up. Just recently, I think 2 months ago, there was an inauguration on the of a new project that is consisting of investing in the cashew sector, called Invest in the Cashew Sector and Processing, something like that. I can't recall the name of the project, but that is already in place to make sure that the government work hand in hand with NGO partners to be able to boost production in Guinea-Bissau. So there are some programs that are in place by the ministry to actually boost production in Guinea-Bissau in the near future.
Thank you very much, Kaba. But there is a question here. I don't know. Now I begin to shift more towards Jim, but then all the others can take it. Whether we think that Africans should stop cross-border trading of cashew. Should every country ban cross-border trading? What does it mean for cashew exports in general? Or the development of the sector in Africa?
The first thing about making a regulation or a policy is that you have to have the capacity to enforce it. As you ban something, look at the situation in Benin. If you ban the export and you're serious, you need to be able to enforce it. But you also need to be in conformity with treaties with other countries, with the trade agreements with other countries. And so bans would not really be in conformity with those. It seems to me that it's pointless to try and stop something that you can't stop. It's also never clear what the actual impact of such regulatory manners will be. So you can do something, and this is a big problem with policy, is that what might appear to be a good idea day one has certain unintended consequences. Banning the export of cross-border trade for cashews, for example, might cause farm gate prices to collapse, which would not be, in the long term, would not achieve the objective of increasing production, and in the short term, would damage farmers' income. In my opinion, I think that cross-border trade is healthy, but that it should be recorded, regulated, and managed. Banning it's going to be difficult, so why do it? The more positive things, so Cabot's told us about this twin approach in Guinea-Bissau, allowing the exporters access much closer to the farm gate, which reduces costs and is an incentive to sell for export through Bissau, and then combining that with some form of regulation enforcement on the land border. That's not a bad idea, is it? Because you're mixing both. So I don't think that you can say, first of all, Africans should stop or not stop cross-border trading because the difference between countries is too great. People should, insofar as possible, stop illegal trade, but then it should be looked at as to why people might take the risk of carrying out that illegal trade and see what that means in the longer run. And also, if trade is to be controlled, then you need to see what are the consequences of that. So if, for example, if it's outstandingly more cost effective to export through a port in a neighboring country, then that should be considered as the export point until such time as the ports in the country can be made more efficient. But there has to be some kind of balancing factors so that the government and the farmers in the exporting country don't suffer. So I don't think it's a case of stopping cross-border trading. I think it's a case of properly analysing it and seeing for each border what's the best way forward, and perhaps trying to get cooperation between governments.
Thank you very much, Jim. Now on to the last question, actually. We have been talking about cross-border, the banning of cross-border trades. But now we've also had some export bans during the course of this year. And the question is, what is the outlook for Tanzania in the second half of the year? Because they are coming in very late. And then we have export bans. We have also delays in the crop in West Africa. What do you foresee to be the impact on Tanzania later on in the year?
Well, it seems to me that in Tanzania in the coming year, you probably will have a higher price kernels market. I don't think by that time of year that the RCN market will be particularly higher. You will, even with the worst scenarios that we've been discussing, of 15% lower crop, it seems unlikely that will have had a huge effect by then. But if I were looking at the Tanzanian situation, I would be optimistic for the upcoming season. I would think that if Tanzania can produce a good crop, there will be definitely a market for it. I think the kernels that are processed in Tanzania will find a market. And I think that all in all, Tanzanian farmers should expect a better price. So with that in mind, it would be a good year for the board and the government generally to support the distribution of inputs and to facilitate a larger crop. It will definitely be needed, and it could be a much better year than we've seen over the last 2 years. Of course, weather has to be considered, and I don't know nobody knows what the weather will be for the coming months, but it could have a big impact, of course, on the crop in Tanzania, as it has had elsewhere.
I thought that was going to be the last question, but sorry, just a few minutes if we can take 2 more questions. One to Dara, whether there's any update on Cambodian RCN crop figures and whether it will be 700,000 or less. And quick one, and then I go to Alex to address one question on IVC, and then we move on. Any update on the Cambodian crop? What will be the volume this year?
Actually, as you know that last year we harvest around 700,000 metric ton of raw cashew nut last year, and we hope that this year the production will be going down maybe 15% that I told the meeting earlier. That's what we expect, but let's see, because the 3 months that we export to Vietnam more than last year. But let's see what will be the real figure for this year.
Thank you, Anne. Alex,
Yeah.
the export ban, how long is it going to be? The suspension on the movement of exporters' trucks, how long is it going to be?
The ban?
Yes. So the question is about the suspension of the movement of exporters' trucks, and whether this is going to continue and for how long.
Definitely, it's a decision from the regulator or from the government. I think the purpose is to support the local processors to cover the raw cashew buying. I cannot announce, or I don't know how far it will last. I think we can get more information maybe later to update everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim, have you picked up any information around that?
No, I honestly don't think the regulators have themselves decided how long such a ban will last. I think they're following the progress and they'll make their decision as they go.
Okay. All right. Okay. So thank you very much, Jim, and also Alex, Andara Kava, and Amit for joining us. And I'll hand you over now to Jim to tell us what to expect in the next GME. So thank you all for your input, and a pleasure having you.
Thank you,
so
Jim.
Over to you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Few talking points before we go over the next couple of weeks. Keep an eye on the second crop's progress, particularly in Côte d'Ivoire. Keep an eye, obviously, on the weather too. But will there be a follow through in the kernels market? Will buyers pursue prices higher? That too will be interesting to see. Watch out for changes in regulation. Will there be any change in the situation in Benin in terms of the formal export of RCN, or in Guinea-Bissau? We've seen some interesting changes in Guinea-Bissau. Will there be more? Look for India's crop. Amit has given us a really interesting picture that will evolve in the coming weeks. It's going to be a longer crop, a slower crop rather, but it's going to be a shorter crop if the monsoon comes a little bit earlier. Is it possible that you could get a speculative bubble kick off in the RCN market? It's possible, I think. Keep an eye on that. It can happen, but based on what we've heard in terms of production, there probably isn't a justification in the fundamentals for such a development. The two crops that are crucial now to whether that happens or not are India and Côte d'Ivoire. So for the next time, we're going to talk about, we'll talk about markets, of course, and we'll talk about production. We'll focus in on production again, and we'll update on what we've been talking about today. On the analysis side, next time I'm planning to have a look at processing in Africa, the progress of processing and the progress of the kernels trade in African countries. On the sustainability aspect of the webinar, I'm going to take a look to a subject that's very close to processing, and that is the links between producers and processors. So I'll finish for today. Thanks very much to everyone who's attended. A special thanks to those who've participated by asking questions. And of course, my eternal thanks to our 4 panelists for their calm, considered and fact-based commentary on the market. We can all learn from their approach. Thanks very much, everyone. Talk to you next time. Back to
And
you,
a big
Ernest.
thanks to
Thank
Jim
you.
Fitzpatrick.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thanks to all of you.
Yeah.
And please
Thank
take
you
note,
to all of you. Thank
the
you.
ACA
Bye.
conference is now in Benin, Cotonou, Benin, from the 17th to 19th of September. And see you all there. Bye-bye.
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 See you.
Bye-bye.
And I used these skills on training my colleagues at the nursery. We now use science that we prepare in the same day, and we graft. We graft millions of cashew seedlings per year, and some of those seedlings are grafted with science, prepared and collected in the same day. This is a good achievement for us, because we use it to prepare 7 days before. So we have an impact in reducing the time of grafting.